We are ready now to listen to the words of the Holy Gospel, the good news of Jesus that give our hearts life and spirit. Please join me in singing the Gospel acclamation.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
Great crowds were traveling with Jesus, and he turned and addressed them. If anyone comes to me without hating his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. And which of you, wishing to construct a tower, does not sit down and calculate the cost to see if there is enough for its completion? Otherwise, after laying the foundation and finding himself unable to finish the work, the onlookers would laugh at him and say, "This one began to build what he did not have the resources to finish." Or what king marching into battle would not first sit down and decide whether, with 10,000 troops, he can successfully oppose another king, advancing upon him with 20,000 troops? But if not, while he is still far away, he will send a delegation to ask for peace terms. And in the same way, any one of you who does not renounce all his possessions cannot be my disciple. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, we are into the Labor Day weekend once again, which seems to come closer together to July 4th as we advance in years. The summer seems to go by rather quickly. It's also the beginning of football season. I imagine you're all very happy about that. But it's upon us, and the other day I thought of that. I was driving by the church and looked over on the fields at LaSalle and saw some of the students there practicing, football with their uniforms on. It was a hot day. I felt sorry for them. Hot day, and they were doing those calisthenics, running around the track and blocking, all things that they do to get in shape. And I got somewhere along the line on that field over there and on any athletic field around the country this past week, the coach said this phrase. He said, "No pain, no gain." And that's a very common phrase in athletics and other situations as well. Of course, the basic meaning is it takes a little work to get to your goals in any endeavor. We know that from the Olympics and all kinds of occupations. We need a little discipline. In fact, discipline and disciple come from the same root word, and the idea of a little bit of working at things and denying ourselves what we have to deny ourselves. So sports metaphors often apply very well and quite nicely to everyday situations as well, and that's one of them, certainly. And isn't Jesus saying something like that in his gospel today, where he said to his disciples that to be on his team, which is the winning team, by the way, you have to have some discipline, which implies sacrifice and awareness of the cost, and working hard and dedication and leaving some other things behind. That's what he's saying. And it certainly is a very sobering challenge for all of us. I was reminded, though, from this situation of becoming a disciple, back to the way confirmation used to be administered in the old days when I was confirmed, and many of you as well. It was similar to the way it's done now, but a little change. There was one little gesture in that old ceremony, and I was probably in the 5th grade many years ago, and the bishop came around every 4 years to our little community and confirmed the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders at the same time. So the ages groups kind of were different, a mixture. And after he confirmed us with the oils, he would give us a little slap on the face. Did any of you experience that? Probably did. And we used to have fun with that, about scaring the younger kids that the bishop was really going to sock you when he confirmed you. The idea being there, of course, that expect opposition if you're going to be a Christian. Expect some opposition if you're going to be a disciple. We used to say, be a soldier of Christ. They kind of got rid of that in a way it's kind of militaristic sound, and be a soldier of Christ and going off to war like honored Christian soldiers and things like that. But it wasn't a sacrament as it is today of becoming at least a partial adult in the community of believers, disciples. The neuroliturgy since Vatican II changed somewhat. Instead of having a little pat on the cheek, which was really a love tap, basically, the bishop doesn't do that, but he says to the candidate, peace be with you, and also with you, the respondent says. And that's a good message too, to preach peace. That's one of Christ's basic messages, peace in our hearts, peace among all nations, and so on. And peace is a wonderful message that I hope that we work on in our individual lives, but we know that true peace only comes after winning a few hard battles, and that's been proven throughout all of history, without carrying a few crosses and getting to the end. One upsetting word in today's gospel, you probably know what it is. It said, and I want to find it there, it says, hate your mother and father, your wife and children, your brothers and sisters. I hope Christ didn't really mean that literally. Please don't take that message away today to go out and hate anyone. But sometimes things lose their meaning in translation, and what the actual meaning of that word hate would be something like, well, prefer God's will over anything else that might stand in the way in certain situations in life. Like if your parents' will for you and God's will for you kind of come in opposition, well, you try your best to try to follow God's will, because Christ's message is to love your family. He preached love of neighbor and God and himself, of course, and that is still his saying and preach. It is to think of God's will first and only hate one thing, and you know what that is. You hate sin. That's what we should really hate. Now, this particular message about choosing was clearly demonstrated in the life of many of our saints. What comes to mind now, one of our saints, St. Thomas More of the 16th century England, where he was the Lord Chancellor under the wicked King Henry VIII. And we know a little bit about the history, of course. He couldn't have held a higher rank in the government. And Lord Chancellor was respected by all the people, intelligent, a wonderful person in that particular job. But as we all know, he fell into disfavor with the king because of refusing to acknowledge Henry's marriage to Anne Boleyn and refusing to recognize Henry as the king of this new church he was setting up, the Church of England, and so on. So consequently, he lost his job, to say the least. And he was thrown into the Tower of London, a terrible place to be, and was there for several months, mistreated along the way. And during that time, his family came to him, his daughters and his wife, pleading with him to please at least pretend to agree with the king. Just sign that paper, it'll be all right. And just, even though you don't really believe in what he's doing and are against it, just save yourself and save us as well, and save our property and all that you have built up in life. But of course, Thomas More was steadfast. He was finally put to death on the charge of treason in the July month of 1535. And it's interesting to note that his final words as going to the place of execution, a martyr of the church, a martyr for the faith, he says, "The king's good servant, but God's first." That's a wonderful message too. Many of us, we are not in our day called to that kind of a sacrifice, but we have to make some sacrifices. He was called a man for all seasons in a very famous play and movie that was on some years ago, a wonderful depiction of his life. A man for all seasons, both the good and the bad times, the ups and the downs. He was steadfast in his faith. So it's a real challenge to be a disciple of Christ. It's also a privilege to be a disciple of Christ. And Christ didn't kid around. He was right up front with talking about carrying crosses. And he didn't promise us a rose garden and not deliver. But he said no need to be weak-kneed or cold feet to get that, but to know how to evaluate the cost and not to be afraid, even though our challenges today are different than those of the early Christians and those of the times of St. Thomas More and among other people. But nevertheless, they can be difficult to stand up to be a Christian, to acknowledge your faith in the public market and in the public square. But we're not alone, because Christ's promise is true today and always. I am with you all days, even to the very consummation of the world. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.